There's a sound that cuts through time, a high-pitched wail, raw and mechanical, the kind that makes every nerve in your body tense with anticipation. Imagine a machine so light it feels alive beneath you, responding not to input but to instinct. It doesn't hum, it shrieks. It doesn't glide, it attacks. And when it was born, it didn't just change the race. It defined an era of speed so wild the world had to rewrite the rules to contain it. This was the moment when engineering met audacity, when the line between control and chaos blurred into pure exhilaration. What came out of that fusion became the standard by which every machine of its kind would be measured, feared, and adored. This is the story of the ultimate two-stroke weapon that left a scar on the sport and a legacy that refuses to fade. If you love the sound of history screaming down a straight, hit like, subscribe, and tell us which legend you want unleashed next. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma arrived like a thunderclap in 1985, a road-legal distillation of Suzuki's Grand Prix dominance that brought pure racing DNA to the street. To understand how the RG500 Gamma came to exist, you have to rewind to a time when motorcycle engineering was at its most daring. The late 1970s and early 1980s were ruled by two-stroke fury, lightweight machines capable of absurd power-to-weight ratios, the kind of performance that demanded both skill and bravery. Suzuki had already conquered the racetrack with the RG500, a factory GP machine that delivered Barry Sheene his world titles, and turned Suzuki into a force of nature in 500cc racing. Translating that success into a street bike wasn't just ambitious, it was borderline reckless. Yet that's exactly what Suzuki set out to do. The mission for the Suzuki RG500 Gamma was clear: create a production motorcycle that mirrored the company's racing prototype as closely as possible. It had to look, sound, and feel like the real thing. No watered-down interpretation, no compromise for comfort or emissions. This was the era before electronics softened the edges, when every twist of the throttle was a test of nerve and mechanical empathy. Suzuki's engineers built it around a 498cc square 4 engine, a layout essentially composed of two parallel twin motors joined together around a common crankcase. Each of the 4 cylinders fired through its own expansion chamber, creating that signature Banshee wail. It made about 95 horsepower at 9,500 RPM, numbers that for the mid-1980s bordered on insanity for a street-legal bike weighing just over 340 pounds dry. But power alone wasn't what made the Suzuki RG500 Gamma special. It was the way it delivered that power. Below 6,000 RPM, it was docile, even sluggish. Then the power valves opened, and the engine erupted, slamming into a manic surge that arrived all at once. Riders described it as a switch being flipped, from calm to chaos in a heartbeat. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. This Jekyll and Hyde personality was the essence of two-stroke performance, and Suzuki didn't try to tame it. Instead, the company built the rest of the motorcycle around that character. The chassis was pure race tech, an aluminum box section frame derived directly from the GP bikes, designed for rigidity and precision at the cost of comfort. The suspension, adjustable front and rear, was tuned for aggressive handling rather than plushness, giving riders the confidence to carve corners with scalpel-like accuracy. It wasn't forgiving, but in the hands of a skilled pilot, it was devastatingly quick. The brakes, dual discs up front and a single rear, provided serious stopping power for the time, though even those could be overwhelmed by the Gamma's ferocity when ridden at full tilt. From the moment you saw it, the Suzuki RG500 Gamma looked like a missile. Its bodywork mimicked the factory GP machines, minimal, angular, and unapologetically functional. The square headlight, the bold graphics, the way the seat cowl tucked into the tail section, it screamed racer. This wasn't a toy for casual riders. It was a statement for enthusiasts who wanted to live the dream of piloting a Grand Prix bike on public roads. And yet, it wasn't just aesthetics or engineering bravado. It represented a philosophical leap. Suzuki had built a machine that refused to dilute the connection between man and machine. Owning a Suzuki RG500 Gamma was an experience unlike anything else in its time. Riders spoke of how it demanded total concentration. A moment's hesitation, and the rear tire would spin up. Too much throttle mid-corner, and you'd be wrestling a bike that wanted to high-side into orbit. But when you got it right, when the revs hit the sweet spot and the chassis danced beneath you, it felt transcendent. The Gamma didn't reward half measures. It demanded respect, precision, and rhythm. Every ride was a performance. And the margin for error was thin. Suzuki's decision to put such a raw machine into public hands wasn't just a marketing stunt, it was a reflection of the competitive spirit that defined the brand in that period. The company was riding high from its GP success and wanted to cement that reputation in the showroom. While rivals were starting to prioritize broader appeal and refinement, Suzuki doubled down on purity. The RG500 Gamma wasn't built to be a volume seller, it was a halo product. A declaration that Suzuki could translate its race-winning formula directly to the street. In markets like the UK, Canada, and parts of Europe, it caused a sensation. In the US, however, the Gamma never officially arrived. Emissions regulations and liability concerns kept it away, turning it into a forbidden fruit for American enthusiasts who could only read about it in magazines or import it privately. That scarcity only added to its mystique. Those who managed to get their hands on one joined a cult of riders who relished the challenge of taming a machine that felt alive in the most dangerous way. Behind the engineering brilliance was an unmistakable sense of rebellion. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma was a product of a time when innovation came from pushing limits rather than following rules. The engineers didn't set out to make a friendly motorcycle. They wanted to make one that scared even seasoned riders into respect. It was a mechanical handshake with danger, an invitation to experience the edge where control fades into instinct. As the 1980s wore on, the Gamma's reputation grew. It became a measuring stick for performance, a benchmark that forced other manufacturers to question how far they were willing to go. It wasn't the fastest on paper, nor the easiest to ride, but it captured the imagination because it felt untamed. Every ride was a story, every corner a gamble. And that feeling of raw, unfiltered speed would define the legend it left behind. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma wasn't just a motorcycle. It was a moment in time captured in metal and oil, a fusion of human ambition and mechanical precision that would never be replicated in quite the same way. The choices Suzuki made in its creation would go on to shape an entire generation of two-stroke fanatics and inspire the evolution of performance motorcycles for decades to come. But as with all legends, success invites challenge. And that's where the next chapter begins. The world's reaction to a machine that was almost too wild for its own good. When the Suzuki RG500 Gamma hit the streets, it didn't just raise eyebrows, it detonated expectations. Overnight, the Gamma became the benchmark for what a true race replica motorcycle could be. While other manufacturers teased with GP-inspired machines, Suzuki had unleashed the real thing. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma wasn't a facsimile. It was a road-going cousin of the actual Grand Prix bike, down to the square-4 engine configuration and the uncompromising chassis geometry. This purity gave it a magnetic pull for enthusiasts and racers alike. But it also drew controversy from those who thought Suzuki had gone too far in putting such a volatile weapon into the hands of the public. From the first test rides, reviewers were divided. Some hailed the Suzuki RG500 Gamma as the ultimate rider's machine, a bike that delivered an authentic racing experience without the red tape of the paddock. Others called it unhinged, accusing Suzuki of prioritizing bragging rights over rideability. But that polarity only fueled the legend. People wanted to see if they were good enough to handle it, if they could survive its narrow power band and explosive delivery. It wasn't uncommon for journalists to describe the Gamma as a GP bike with mirrors, and that wasn't hyperbole. This was a motorcycle that demanded absolute precision, where mistakes had real consequences. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma's square-4 engine wasn't just innovative, it was an engineering rebellion against convention. Most road bikes of the time used simpler parallel twin or inline-4 configurations that offered predictable performance and smoother delivery. Suzuki's design, by contrast, was born from the racetrack, splitting power delivery across two crankshafts and synchronizing them to create a symphony of combustion that sounded and felt like nothing else. Its rotary valve induction system ensured razor-sharp throttle response, and the power valves helped broaden what little usable mid-range it had. Still, the Gamma's personality was merciless, timid off the line, then explosive beyond 7,000 RPM, with a hit of acceleration that could make even experienced riders tense their grip. On the road, this translated into a uniquely thrilling experience. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma demanded planning and anticipation. You had to keep it on the pipe, always ready to chase that narrow band of ferocity where the engine truly came alive. City traffic was torture. Mountain roads and race circuits were heaven. Riders learned to dance with the power band, slip the clutch, time the revs, feather the throttle, and when they got it right, the reward was pure transcendence. The Gamma didn't make you feel safe. It made you feel awake. Every gear change, every apex, every burst of acceleration reminded you that you were straddling something closer to a weapon than a vehicle. Competition inevitably took notice. Other manufacturers had their own high-performance 500cc two-strokes, but few matched the Gamma's combination of race-bred authenticity and engineering audacity. Yamaha's RD500LC and Honda's NS400R were more refined, more approachable, but they lacked the Suzuki RG500 Gamma's raw mechanical aggression. Suzuki wasn't interested in balance. It wanted to deliver the most direct link possible between its racing program and the street. The result was a motorcycle that felt more alive than its rivals, but also far less forgiving. For some, that was exactly the point. For others, it was too much. In racing, privateers saw the Suzuki RG500 Gamma as a golden opportunity. Here was a machine that could compete in national series with minimal modification. Many were entered in production-based competitions, and while reliability could be finicky, especially when ridden flat out for long stretches, the performance potential was undeniable. Tuners discovered that the Gamma's square-4 design responded beautifully to porting, exhaust, and carburetor upgrades. With the right setup, these bikes could push well over 110 horsepower, turning an already manic experience into something almost mythic. The aftermarket scene blossomed, with companies offering lighter wheels, revised suspension kits, and even engine swaps for those who wanted to chase the ghost of GP glory. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma wasn't a bike you bought for practicality. Fuel economy was laughable, and maintenance wasn't optional. It was survival. Two-stroke engines require meticulous care, fresh plugs, frequent rebuilds, and constant attention to oil and jetting. Owners became mechanics out of necessity, learning to read the engine's moods and sounds like a second language. Yet this intimacy was part of the appeal. The Gamma demanded involvement, and in return, it gave its riders something modern machines often lack: a visceral sense of connection. By the late 1980s, however, the world around the Suzuki RG500 Gamma began to change. Emissions standards tightened, fuel injection was emerging, and manufacturers were shifting toward four-stroke engines for sustainability and broader appeal. Two-strokes, once the pinnacle of racing performance, became politically and environmentally unfashionable. Suzuki's own GP team eventually abandoned the architecture that had defined its success. The RG500 Gamma, too wild for mainstream tastes, quietly faded from showrooms. Production ended after only a few years, leaving behind a legacy that seemed frozen in time, a perfect snapshot of when speed was everything and compromise was optional. Yet even as the market moved on, the legend of the Suzuki RG500 Gamma grew stronger. Riders who had owned one refused to let go. Others spent years trying to track down clean examples. By the 1990s, the Gamma had achieved cult status. Gray market imports trickled into countries where it was never officially sold, including the US, where enthusiasts endured mountains of paperwork and customs headaches just for the privilege of owning one. Its scarcity made it even more desirable. To have a Suzuki RG500 Gamma in your garage wasn't just about speed, it was about owning a piece of history, a defiant reminder of when motorcycle engineering cared more about thrill than compliance. Collectors and historians often point to the Gamma as a symbol of peak analog performance. It represented the end of an era when riders controlled every aspect of the experience. No traction control, no ride-by-wire, no electronic safety nets. What mattered was your skill, your reflexes, your bravery. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma didn't adapt to you. You adapted to it. And that purity is exactly why, decades later, it remains one of the most revered and feared motorcycles ever built. But to truly understand why the Suzuki RG500 Gamma endures, not just as a collector's item, but as an icon, you have to look beyond the specs and the nostalgia. The Gamma didn't just dominate an era, it reshaped the conversation about what motorcycles could be. It proved that risk and reward could coexist in perfect harmony, that performance could be raw and mechanical without losing soul. And even though time and technology moved on, the essence of what the Gamma represented, courage, precision, and unfiltered speed, would echo in every sport bike that followed. In the next part, we'll explore how that legacy evolved, what the Gamma means to riders today, and why its spirit still haunts the modern superbike world. The Toyota GR Corolla didn't just make noise when it launched. It created an aftershock that's still being felt years later. As the industry edges closer to full electrification, the GR Corolla stands as one of the last great analog performance cars, and its influence runs deeper than its spec sheet. Toyota's rally-bred hatch reshaped how enthusiasts view the brand, how automakers think about passion projects, and how performance itself can evolve without losing its soul. The GR Corolla's 1.6-liter turbo triple and 6-speed manual didn't just deliver numbers, they delivered an experience, one that reaffirmed why driving still matters. As Toyota looks toward hybridized and electric performance, the GR Corolla's DNA is becoming a blueprint for emotional engineering. Engineers have studied how its tactile connection, balanced chassis, and accessible excitement resonated with drivers. That understanding now filters into future GR projects, some powered by internal combustion, others by electric motors, all guided by the same philosophy: make it feel alive. Toyota's leadership has been vocal about preserving fun to drive as a core value, even in an EV world. And the GR Corolla gave them proof that this isn't just nostalgia, it's market validation. In communities across the US, the GR Corolla has taken on a life of its own. Cars and Coffee meets that once overflowed with supercars now draw crowds around this hatchback, its owners proudly talking torque split ratios and rally lineage. Online, content creators film canyon runs and track sessions, capturing the sound of that triple-cylinder exhaust crackling off guardrails. What's fascinating is the demographic range. Seasoned tuners who once owned turbocharged imports now park next to 20-somethings driving their first performance car. The GR Corolla became common ground, an intersection of generations bonded by mechanical joy. Even as electric vehicles gain dominance, the GR Corolla serves as a counterpoint, proof that emotion doesn't require excess. Its compact form, efficient displacement, and precision engineering reflect restraint, not waste. It shows that the future of performance doesn't have to be louder or bigger, it just has to be intentional. This idea resonates especially in the US, where automotive culture has long been tied to size and horsepower. The GR Corolla reminded everyone that speed isn't just about straight lines. It's about rhythm, feel, and confidence. That's a lesson that transcends propulsion type. Of course, time moves on. Rumors already swirl about what comes next. Hybrid GR variants, electrified successors, maybe even synthetic fuel experiments. But whatever badge they wear, their spirit will trace back here, to this improbable hatch built in Motomachi by a small team of believers. The GR Corolla didn't need decades to earn icon status. It achieved it the moment it redefined what a Corolla could be. For Toyota, it's become a living metaphor for transformation, a sign that even within a corporate giant, there's room for rebellion when the right people care enough to push for it. Collectors have noticed. Early Morizo editions have already begun appreciating, and clean examples of the first-year Circuit edition are being tucked away like future classics. But for most owners, the GR Corolla isn't a museum piece. It's something to drive hard and often. Track days, mountain roads, cross-country trips, this car encourages use. Toyota engineered it tough enough to handle abuse yet refined enough for daily life. That usability, combined with rarity, gives it staying power. Decades from now, when enthusiasts scroll through old footage, the GR Corolla will be remembered not just for its performance, but for its defiance. What's perhaps most impressive is how it altered perception within Toyota's global audience. The Corolla name once evoked reliability, affordability, and predictability. Now it also carries connotations of agility, excitement, and purpose. That's marketing gold, but it's also cultural evolution, proof that a brand's reputation isn't fixed. It can be rewritten one passionate project at a time. By leveraging a familiar nameplate and imbuing it with new meaning, Toyota bridged two audiences, the practical and the passionate. Few automakers have pulled that off so gracefully. Looking at the broader landscape, the GR Corolla's success signaled to other manufacturers that performance isn't dead, it's just evolving. Even as emissions targets tighten and electrification becomes mandatory, there's a hunger for connection. People don't want sterile speed, they want stories, sensations, and control. The GR Corolla delivered all three. Its legacy might not be in horsepower wars or production volume, but in how it reminded an entire industry that excitement still sells when it's authentic. And that's where the GR Corolla's story truly pays off. It's not just a swan song for gasoline, it's a statement about continuity. Enthusiasm doesn't end with electrification, it adapts. Whether Toyota's next performance car hums instead of roars, the template remains: compact, driver-focused, emotionally charged. The GR Corolla ensured that the future of driving, whatever form it takes, won't be built entirely by algorithms. It'll still be shaped by people who love the feeling of connection between machine and driver. So when enthusiasts talk about this era decades from now, the Toyota GR Corolla will stand as the moment a sensible brand remembered its wild side and proved that even in a world chasing efficiency and automation, the thrill of driving can still feel utterly human. For anyone in the US who's ever dreamt of owning a Suzuki RG500 Gamma, the reality is equal parts fascination and frustration. The bike was never sold here officially, which means every example on American soil arrived through private import, usually from Canada, the UK, or Europe. That makes the Suzuki RG500 Gamma rare, expensive, and occasionally complicated. But for those who make the effort, it's one of the most rewarding machines you can own. Most examples today trade anywhere between $25,000 and $50,000, depending on originality, mileage, and documentation. Restored bikes can exceed that, especially those in factory colors with matching numbers. The difficulty isn't just finding one, it's finding one that's been maintained properly. These engines are precision instruments that punish neglect. Two-stroke ownership requires commitment. The Suzuki RG500 Gamma's square-four engine needs regular top-end rebuilds, typically every 10 to 15,000 miles or sooner if ridden hard. Parts availability is improving thanks to specialist shops and online communities, but costs add up quickly. Carburetors need to be balanced, oil injection systems checked, and seals replaced on schedule. Many owners keep a second bike for daily use and reserve the Gamma for weekend rides or vintage track days. That said, the bike's simplicity can also be its strength. There are no electronics to fail, no traction control systems to troubleshoot, just mechanical honesty. If you keep it tuned, it will reward you with that otherworldly rush that modern machines can't duplicate. For prospective US buyers, importing a Suzuki RG500 Gamma is still possible under the 25-year exemption rule, which means you can bring one in legally as a collectible. But patience is key. Inspect thoroughly for corrosion, frame cracks, or amateur modifications. These bikes have often been raced or tuned beyond their limits. The ideal example is stock or lightly modified with documentation of rebuilds. Insurance is surprisingly manageable given the bike's age and collector status, though availability varies by state. Once registered, the Gamma is as street legal as any other motorcycle, assuming you have the nerve to ride it the way it was built to be ridden. Riding a Suzuki RG500 Gamma today is a revelation. Even in an era of 200 horsepower superbikes, its 95 horsepower two-stroke punch feels wild because of how it delivers that power. Sudden, visceral, and physical. The chassis still feels taut and direct, and the brakes, while dated, remain strong with proper pads and upkeep. On a winding road or track, it's an immersive experience that reminds you how far modern bikes have come and what they've lost in the process. There's no digital filter between you and the engine. Every throttle input, every vibration, every whiff of two-stroke oil connects you to something primal. That's why the Suzuki RG500 Gamma's legacy resonates so strongly. It's more than a motorcycle. It's a time capsule from when riding was a test of instinct rather than software calibration. It represents a purity of engineering that may never return. A machine built without compromise, designed to thrill rather than to please. For American enthusiasts, it's a chance to experience the essence of Grand Prix racing in its most authentic form. No track license required. So what does the Gamma teach us today? That performance isn't just about numbers. It's about feeling, the kind that makes your heart race before the engine even starts. It's about respect for machinery that demands your full attention and rewards your precision. And it's about legacy, because the Suzuki RG500 Gamma remains a touchstone for what real performance means. Raw, immediate, and unfiltered. If you ever get the chance to see one, listen to one, or better yet, ride one, you'll understand why riders still speak of it in reverent tones. It's the motorcycle equivalent of a comet. Brilliant, rare, impossible to forget. Decades later, the Gamma still reminds us that the pursuit of speed is ultimately a pursuit of feeling, and that the machines that make us feel the most alive are the ones that never quite play by the rules. And that's the enduring power of the Suzuki RG500 Gamma, a two-stroke legend that screamed, conquered, and vanished, leaving the rest of the world trying to catch its echo.